Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another and the last of 2023's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation webinars. Today, we have joining us is Brad Jordahl Redlin with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and he's going to be talking about the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program, certifying that Minnesota's farms and waters can prosper together. So thank you for joining us, Brad. To everyone else tuning in today, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we will get them to Brad at the end of his presentation. So with that, take it away, Brad.
All right, well, thank you. It's a pleasure being here. This is fun. I'd like the opportunity and talk about what we do up here, and also, maybe in questions and stuff, I can get some ideas for improvements or changes. So that's the topic today, is the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program. It is something that will take some explanation, I think, at the same time that it's pretty logically consistent and basic. It also definitely has tentacles and certain amounts of complexities. One way to start off this conversation is just to pose the question, so what is a agricultural water quality certified farm? Well, the answer is that it's anything it wants to be. I put up just a couple examples to make the point. We have the food farm, local producer of produce, certified organic, solar powered, supplies CSA shares and some of the best food in the Duluth area in Minnesota. Is water quality certified. Then there's an Artie Offit Farms Twin Rivers seed potato farm, around 3,000 acres of potato production that meets the market for McDonald's French fries demand. So agriculture is producing things. Our role is to assist those growers in identifying risks and mitigating those risks in whatever form of operation they have. So that's the simple thing, and then the reality is how we go about doing that and what is all involved in doing that. So the program, just jumping in on it here, I'll just start here in that it's actually a partnership effort, local, state, federal government, including private industry as well, but it was formed with an MOU with USDA and EPA at the federal level with the state of Minnesota to create a certification program for farms in our state. The program is housed at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, where my staff work, but the program also includes other state agencies, our Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, our Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, that's a delegated agency in our state, and something we have called the Board of Water and Soil Resources, a great entity that's kind of like a private NRCS for our state. And then, as already mentioned, we have the federal participation form of USDA, EPA, and Minnesota Soil and Water Conservation Districts are a central element of what we do too. They are the, I always call them the spinal column or the central nervous system of our operations. As I've already kind of touched on, the way certification is done, it's not, like some certifications where there's a particular standard and checklist. What we do is whole farm planning for water quality. It's a risk assessment process we developed to essentially check every parcel on the farm under every cropping scenario, because conditions change naturally on what's being grown. But to look for risks and to develop ways to mitigate the risks that are determined in farming operation, wherever they may be, at whatever point in the rotation or whatever condition may be surrounding it. So we do that by just pairing producers with professionals to develop those site-specific solutions. So it's in some ways the opposite of a certification program that says, here's a menu of things you need to do, and she'll see that they're done. Instead, we go out there and say, what is the risk? What is the challenge? What is the threat posed to water quality? And how are we going to make that threat get mitigated? And that's our process. So to talk about some other components of it, jumping around, but just try to get our hands around this whole project that we conduct here. But from a producer's standpoint, what's some of the things that is available to them, or they gain from it? We hope a lot, but one of the primary things that actually came in the original MOU that created this program with the federal government was the component of having a regulatory certainty. Won't go into the long story, but at the federal level, they're doing some stuff with ESA, endangered species listings, and developing kind of conservation planning for providing certainty for growers to avoid potential complications with that. They came to Minnesota and said, "You're the headwaters state, and maybe we could talk about including in your effort that we're already underway in making as a certification program for handling this water quality challenge." But they said maybe include a regulatory certainty component that says those growers who get certified will be deemed in compliance with any new regulations that come along. And that's exactly what we've done. We have this regulatory certainty component. The certification is a 10-year contract between the state and the growers saying they are certified, lays their responsibilities for maintaining all practices and management, and certainly the state's responsibility for the services that we provide and the commitments that we've made, including the regulatory certainty, which just says if there's another new law that comes along, we've walked your entire place, land owned, rented, whatever it is, and mitigated risk. So not knowing what the new regulation is, because it doesn't exist yet, we're just going to deem you in compliance. No one's exempt from anything. They're just deemed in compliance during the certification period that is shown to have already, in some instances, I'm getting ahead of myself, but in some instances, it's already shown that certification has certainly exceeded any regulation components that have been added to us, like buffer laws or something. That's happened here in Minnesota. Anyway, growers also get dedicated financial and technical assistance. We'll be talking more about that later, naturally. Growers have themselves identified for us that one of the things that they really think the program provides them, that they got value that they got out of the program, was this sense of that whole farm kind of checkup. It's not that common where they have that opportunity to just sit with the professional and talk about every aspect of their entire farming operation, every field, every, like I say, crop in the rotation, everything. And that's, it's a personal consultant for absolutely free. That's a value to them. Recognition is something that we certainly want to provide growers should they want it. That they demonstrate that they are doing outstanding performance, that they are protecting their natural resources, their water quality for their neighbors in all of Minnesota and even neighboring states, right? And for those with more consumer-facing operations, it's certainly a branding and marketing opportunity. It can be another attribute that they can provide to their products, and a sign they can bring to the farmers market or put on their CSA share boxes and that sort of thing. Just noting that it's available to, renters, landowners. It can absentee landowners or non-farming landowners can certainly have all their parcels certified, and in so doing, they create really a conservation lease where they have any grower that leases their land. They will say, well, here's the management that should take place on whatever cropping scenario you have. There's an individual management plan for each cropping scenario, so they already have that in place, and creates an automatically professionally created conservation lease. It's free and voluntary, as I said. Growers are often, virtually always, going to be investing some money in the practice adoption, but we certainly do the cost share and financial assistance, so they don't have to absorb all the costs unless they want to, and some do. And by provision of statute in establishing the program, identity and location is automatically by default private, non-public information, but we provide a informed consent form that growers can sign to say that we can identify them as water quality certified publicly, and which most do, but not everyone. I mean, 90% some do, but not all farms do. And jumping around on you here, but then that's a local certification specialist, the people that are conducting these certifications and how they do it. I'll try to describe that very quickly in a slide here, but they are all agronomy conservation accredited professionals. They are experts in their field as recognized through, whether it be NRCS conservation planning or the agronomy accreditations, that sort of thing. And we divide the state up into regions. A little map there of Minnesota shows that we have kind of a lead officer in each one of those regions who then works with primarily with the Soil and Water Conservation District, as I mentioned, to oversee and conduct the certifications in those regions, so that the growers just go try to keep it as locally as possible for them. But again, as I've already described, this really is a personal consultant that works with them to identify their risks, and then those practices that will mitigate those risks that will work best for them, because there's not usually only one way to tackle something. There could be multiple ways, and what's going to work best for a grower, that's what our certifiers are there to assist with. They're also there to identify, go through the thicket of all the financial assistance opportunities that are out there. Growers can't be expected necessarily to negotiate all of that. Our certifiers are there to help them find whatever resources are available for whatever project they might be interested in doing. And again, it's really emphasized this site-specific nature of it. How do you certify a farm in Minnesota? The question was posed at the outset is like, well, it's so different in a driftless area like we share with you in the Southeast, or the Red River Valley up to our north. Vastly different kind of landscapes and agriculture production potentially occurring there. Well, for us, it's just walk out on each individual field. There's sub-portions of that field and see what the challenges are, mitigate those, and you can certify a farm anywhere. And in so doing that, so we look at, physical field properties, the slopes, the soil types, the erodibility indexes, the soil organic matter, the precipitation that's typical. It's 30 years of history is not going to reflect the next ones, but it's all we got. So we look at like the 30 years of history to see when the high precipitation times are on a monthly basis versus what the ground cover is, that sort of thing. I wouldn't describe all of these, but it's just a matter of going in there, getting information, nutrient management. What is your fertilization practice and properties, each crop in the scenario, tillage management, pest management, irrigation, if it's present, how do you manage that? Drainage management, if it's present, how do you manage that? And of course, existing conservation practices and new ones that will get plugged in. So really to start that process, the first grower signs an application with us. They're thereby notifying them, they're identifying themselves as being a participant in the program, eligible to the financial assistance. I'll be describing more of that later again, that then they are entitled to. But with that application signed, they meet with the certification specialist to conduct that effort that I've described in the previous slide, which is the risk assessment, on-field verification of any other potential risk assessment. So we do have a software kind of data collection portal that our certifiers use to get all the information logged in about, what is the fertilization on this particular 80 on corn or on the soybeans or on the sugar beets or whatever it might be. So there's data analysis that goes on in that respect, but then there's also, nothing like looking at the field and seeing what challenges exist that way that obviously these professionals are trained to do. Financial assistance, again, that comes in at whatever point in this process, but the financial assistance is there for them. That's to result in the ultimate risk mitigation that we're after. I guess a little bit more on the kind of the way the program is structured. We do have an advisory committee. It's laid out in the statute that authorized the program. 15 members to represent agriculture interests, conservation interests, local government interests, consumer interests, that sort of thing. Try to get a good array of folks. We do appreciate those who've chosen to work with us and sit on this committee and review our work and provide some guidance and response to what we're doing. You can just see some of the type of folks here from the farm organizations, Farm Bureau, Farmers Union, soybean, corn, that sort of thing, with industry as well, Land O'Lakes, Syngenta, those sorts of things, and then certified growers themselves, and conservation and environmental interests too. Quick time to just point out that partnership is something that we value highly. It's fundamental to our work. We want to engage with folks to access growers, to access expertise for us, to access assistance to growers, to just improve what we do through other expertise and insights, but also then to give out free beer to growers that get certified, which is what a couple of these partners do. Talk real quickly about our budget. People want to know, I guess, what it all costs. So I can tell you that without getting too deep into it, but we have a dedicated portion of sales tax in our state that goes to a clean water fund, $100+ million every year, sometimes $200 million, close. So that is where our funding comes from, is that dedicated fund. The legislature appropriates it on a 2-year basis. We are a biennial budget in our state. And what this slide is just showing is that our, less than 5% of that clean water fund is what we consume. But most of it we pass through. 60% of it just goes immediately out into the field, right, to growers, to the SWCDs and others. And then for an analysis, which is about as basic of analysis you can ever imagine, is just like whatever our total appropriations we've ever received in history of the program, divided by the total acres we've actually certified. So how much dollars per acre is the taxpayer investing? And there's just kind of a historical version of it here. It's always the total amount of all appropriations in our history divided by the acres at that point. So naturally, when we first started out, $500 an acre was, not a good price to be operating the program at, but that's because, all those startup and sunk costs. But what we've arrived at is about a $25 an acre plateau, it looks like, for what we're operating, but we'll keep trying to drive that price down. But we're actually pretty pleased with that kind of price point in terms of what the taxpayer is investing for all that they're getting out of it. And maybe I should skip by this, but I'll keep it in there just for the point that apples and oranges. But as you look at conservation and the landscape, and you look at agriculture as an undertaking, right? Incredibly expensive. The cost of equipment, the cost of land, labor, unbelievably expensive enterprise, right? But why would conservation therefore be cheap? It's not. And I think folks here would know that. But, just for example purposes, a CRP contract in Minnesota is going to be, $154 an acre every year for 10 years, maybe 15. $25 per acre one time for all of those 10 years, which is what certification is currently costing, is, comparatively a bargain. But they're apples and oranges things. I'm not trying to say they're equatable, but it just shows that price point we're at, we're glad to be at. We can't have full control over that, but we're fortunate that what we're delivering is coming in at that kind of a price range. You can see, what per acre costs for other very popular and important conservation programs are, but even like a CREP that can, run up of state and federal totals of $525 million of good work, for the 60,000 acres that are going to be contracted in that project. That's good, and we don't replace that, but by comparative cost, it's at least notable. The financial assistance I've been talking about, the options that we have specifically tied to our program. We do have an Regional Conservation Partnership Program, RCPPs. I imagine most folks might be familiar with those at least. We've had two, had one and renewed one. They reach $9 million total with, costs shared, or some dollars that remain with NRCS for conducting the operations. But what it really amounts to is about $1.5 million a year for certified growers. These are applicants for certification who are going through the process of getting certified and needing to implement practices to obtain that certification, or growers who are already certified and have practices that can get in there, although it remains competitive. So it's primarily the applicants that we want to see adding the new practices to get certified that are primarily have been the recipients of those RCPP dollars. We created a financial assistance grant of our own, just a small quick hitter, just identified out of need, is that, some growers are needing to get some intakes closed or something in their field, and they needed, it would be great if they could get $500 to help them, cover that cost and get it done quickly. And we said, well, why don't we just meet the need here? We'll create an opportunity where we have due to our bureaucratic rules, a $5,000 cap on what can be a non-competitive grant award. We said, all right, then we'll do that. We'll create a $5,000 grant that says up to $5,000 grant that growers can apply for, get approved, conduct that activity, whatever it may be, which can include going on top of an existing equip or some other kind of contract to make it just that much more realistic for the grower to undertake it. And then it's the reimbursement. So then we reimburse up to 75% of that grant amount as was in the application. But really the more important point, or the more basic point, is that, as I described, certification is you out and find the risk, and then you need to find a way to mitigate it. So you're by no means constrained at going through our RCPP or taking our financial assistance grant. It's our certifier's role, and with that grower, to go, hey, if there's anything anywhere that exists in terms of financial and technical assistance to help you meet this mitigation, to mitigate or to make that mitigation, to remove that risk from your farm, then that's our responsibility, our certifiers, and opportunity and responsibilities to provide that, find that for the grower and put it to work. So too often people get really kind of tunnel vision on us, like, oh, we have a grant, and so we're a grant program. It's like, we are not a grant program. We are a whole farm assessment risk mitigation operation, and we access all funds anywhere to conduct that work. It's not enter us to identify for a particular grant, that sort of thing. You'll get all the grants we can find for you, but that's not really our function as solely any kind of simple grant program. We're not structured that way. We're far bigger and more comprehensive than that. We do provide scholarships for, I'll be talking about farm business management later, but not sure how my time is to, looks like I need to get moving. But ultimately what you talk about is certification and implementation of practices. All right. So this is not all the terms are exactly kind of summarized versions of basically conservation practice standards that we've implemented in certifying farms throughout the state. Like I say, they're all going to be different. They're all going to have different risks. They're all going to have different options, a way of meeting those risks. But what we do is go out there and implement practices. And we don't select a favored practice that we want everybody to do. We apply what needs to happen on that particular site or in that particular management scenario that needs to happen to take that risk away from water quality. So, it's great to have, absolutely great to have things like cover crop initiatives and that sort of thing. We fully support those. We do a lot of cover crops, of course, as you can imagine, but that's not our role, is to pick a particular practice that we think is great. Our role is to find problems and fix them. Tell a little bit about what's going on, and then just numbers. We're at 1,400 plus farms. We're over 1 million acres. Crossed 1 million acres last month. See, we're at 1,017,000. Changes every week. So we'll see a difference next week. But we do map and track all new practices that are installed. We obviously record and track and recognize and support the existing practices that growers have out there all over the place. But in terms of saying what impact have we made, we only look at the new practices we installed. And I'll just say that, new practices are GIS map tracked. We got all the data. When you want to talk about things like soil saved or phosphorus loss prevented, nitrogen loss reduced, you can come to us with any metric. We've got the data points. We can plug it in and you can spit out the numbers. So, in doing this work, and as you've probably seen, someone's going to count phosphorus in a different way potentially than another entity or another program will. We can count in any way anybody wants because we've got all the data. But as we run some very basic ones, there's some example of what those outcomes are. We do have an endorsement component to our program that we've added since, we're out there at that kitchen table or leaning up against a pickup box or whatever it is with these growers, talking about everything that they do on their farm, everything they do on their field. We said, well, we can have deeper conversations if they're so inclined to talk about, do you really like wildlife habitat? You're very involved in your local Pheasants Forever chapter or something. It's like, well, if you'd like to pursue that, we convened an array of habitat, wildlife experts, pollinator experts, and that sort of thing. Say, like, what additional and specific wildlife components that aren't removing risk anymore. They're about doing additional things that just enhance something like wildlife habitat. If you want to do that much more, we'll give you a wildlife endorsement and recognition for that. Same thing with deeper dives, integrated pest management. Naturally, soil health, of course, irrigation, water management, something we do with U of M, just got that one underway. And climate smart, naturally, right? Everyone's talking about that, but since we're talking with these growers about everything they're doing already, that certainly fits in, and we appreciate the opportunity to have some financial support for our climate smart endorsement from Ignite Foundation, and now housed through our appropriation, covered through our appropriation that provides a $1,000 payments for growers who take that deeper dive and tease out and suss out more climate practices on their farm that, again, are above and beyond just a water quality protection component, but address those issues. If 25 after the hour is the time I should quit, I guess I'll just note that I'd like to talk about the next couple slides and then I can quit. But here's one other outcome that we've enjoyed being able to access. The Farm Management Management Program in our state's conducted through our Minnesota State colleges. It's a program where growers get to, it's essentially set up as a college course, but you really just enroll in the project where you work one-on-one with a financial advisor who sits down with you in your operation and works with you on maximizing your financial performance in a nutshell. And we love it on a lot of levels. We love it because it's kind of like the left hand or the right hand version of what we do. We're out there doing the agronomy and the conservation with each grower. This is an outstanding program that does, the financial mirror of what we do with the conservation and agronomy. So we also appreciated that they have that financial data, those actual financial numbers on an annual basis, exactly what happened. They see the checkbook. We don't. We shouldn't. We're the state. We don't need to. But we said, why don't you compare those farms that you do work with that are certified versus all those, again, highly motivated managers, because they're spending their own money to participate in this effort of working with the financial consultant. Just compare how they're performing. And so we started that the 2019 crop year and said, well, tell us what you find. And what they found is that it's been more profitable for water quality certifiers, water quality certified farms have been more profitable, higher net income every year tested since 2019 when we started. So up through last year, it's shown the case every time that the water quality certified farms just have higher income. That in itself is, exciting for us, as you can imagine. We like that. Defining the intricate reasons of all, why, and how, a little more difficult, because think back to that practice implementation slide, right? And all the different things that are going to be happening. There's a lot of efforts to pinpoint, on a per acre basis, what's the difference make if I implement this practice and will it be profitable or not? Well, again, I think those are good efforts to undertake, and we're certainly not critical of them. Our experience, all we're going on is our experience is that, what we found is that we do this whole farm assessment, walking through every acre, just maximize their performance, remove risks wherever we can find them. It's unique to each individual farm, but what we find is then on the whole, those farms are just outperforming others. As we pursue looking, more closely at it and trying to get, more information, that's the beauty of this. We'll keep doing it as long as we exist, and we'll just get more information and be able to tease out more. One of the things I have in the pie charts there is you'll notice that the database average is a little higher on sole cropping operations, whereas the certified farms do show a notable difference in really looks like soil health, right? We're talking about livestock and crop together, integrated systems, diversified systems. So already we're looking at that as one of the reasons why they're showing more profitability. Is just that more diversified and integrated, and again, soil health management of like introducing livestock where possible. And I will note that the researchers that do this completely separate from us, we don't do it. They're hesitant to say go get certified and you'll automatically make more money. That's kind of what's being shown. But they will say, and love researchers, right? They say, well, it's been shown that certification does not hinder farm profitability. So, taking that extra effort to do the environmental components so far has demonstrated that it does not hinder farm profitability. It looks like it helps, but, you can't attribute it entirely in a responsible research approach. So with that, I think I may just stop right there. I have several more slides, but Elaine, if that's what should be happening right now, I'm happy to have that happen.
Well, thank you so much, Brad. Yeah, if you want to advance to the slides that we sent you, then we can maybe come back to those other ones, time permitting, after questions. But if you tuned in today for a CCA CEU, you can email Alena Whitaker, that's ALENAW @iastate.edu by 5 p.m. today to get that credit. So please submit your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar if it was different, and your CCA number, and we'll get that submitted on your behalf. So you can go ahead to the next one. If you've attended a previous Iowa Learning Farms webinar, you're familiar with this slide as well, where we're asking you to complete a voluntary demographic survey as a USDA funded program. You can access that survey. It should take no more than like 3 minutes to complete, either by scanning this QR code or visiting iowalearningfarms.org/survey. If you've already done it for this year, you're in good shape. You don't need to do it again. But we will be asking you again in 2024. So thank you for completing that survey for those that you have. And if you haven't already, please do so. All right. So speaking of, the next webinar will be happening in 2024. This is going to be on January 3rd. We're going to have Dr. Mike Castellano. He is the William T. Frankenberger Professor of Soil Science here at Iowa State University's Department of Agronomy. And he's going to be discussing how do we best define and promote soil health. So join us next week for that webinar as well. And there have been quite a few questions that have come in so far, so that's great. So you mentioned that the program analyzes every crop field under different scenarios. Does this include precision conservation? For example, using precision data such as yield to determine marginal areas that are losing money?
Short answer, yes. On that, so trying to tackle that whole thing. Precision agriculture is an outstanding boon to our work when we're doing these risk assessments because of the data present. For example, it's like, well, what pesticides have you used? Well, here's a record. It is the temperature, wind speed, date, everything that we have recorded, right? It's like, well, that helps us in our risk assessment very well. Thank you. A lot of what we do is certification practically is a forward-looking thing. So it's like for the next 10 years, you're going to manage it in this way. You're going to implement this level of IPM on your field. I'm talking about pesticides, that sort of thing. So in that sense, it's all to come. These are commitments made. The analysis occurs on what's happened in the past, but that's, the past is not presumed to be continuing. It's presumed to be, that's where we find our risks, and those have to be changing. So the past must change, right? So we do look at those things, but then in a practical term, like the example cited in the question is, those eroded hilltops are not doing you any good. They're drawing down your profitability across your whole farm. or at least across that whole field anyway. So, our certifier may not get them to seed them into perennial cover, but they'll certainly also work with that precision ag opportunities to better perform their, fertilization, that sort of thing, considering those components.
The next question here is, is there a place folks can find the list of local certification specialists in Minnesota and their contact information? Is that available on the department website?
Would be on our website. A shortcut to it is mylandmylegacy.com. There will be, on certifying your farm, will be listed there will be the area certification specialists, these 8 regions that we broke the state up into. But they're the leads. Those men and women, can say, oh, if you're in Rock County, then you should probably call Rachel or Joe or whoever it might be, right? Or actually, they do the work for Rock County primarily. I'm making all of this up, as you can imagine, but so you'll be actually talking to that area certification specialist, maybe the one who does your certification.
So you were talking about the $25 an acre that the producers receive. Is that going directly to growers, or is it 60% of that 25 per acre?
No, I'm sorry.
Investment.
I completely understand how that was confusing, but the $25 is that's a total appropriation we've received from legislature, from taxpayers, divided by the total acres certified for just how much our program costs to operate. That's not about what farmers get. That's just like, your appropriated funding to conduct a project or a program. And so when we are appropriated money, it's costing us $25 an acre. It's costing taxpayers $25 an acre to run this water quality certification program. The 60% that I mentioned, that's when I get our annual appropriation, our $3 million, that 60% of that is going right out the door, out to the growers in forms of those grants that we talked about. It goes out to soil and water conservation districts to conduct work on our behalf, that sort of thing. So it's not something that we retain at the department. That 60% figure just demonstrate how much of those funds go right out to the community. It's primarily going to growers and certifiers for their work.
I think this one was listed on your practice list because someone is curious if subsurface drainage is allowed to be installed on your certified farms.
Yeah, it can be, certainly, with I just need management controls, and it's something that we absolutely just walk right into. That is the agriculture we need to deal with it. Some of our loudest voices, and not to get into opinion or commentary. It's not mine, it's from growers, but our no-tillers, our organic growers, the food farm I mentioned at the outset, they tiled their ground, tiled their ground, or produce ground. I mean, you're not going to find a better environmentalist in the state. You'll find others like them, but they won't find anyone better. But they said that to maximize their performance and while at the same time keeping their high environmental goals in place, that tiling was an absolute boon to their operation. They just had to manage it. Some manage through collections, some certainly all have to manage it through fertilization rates, those types of things, and attacking the risks that are present. That tile absolutely brings many risks along with it, but those just have to be acknowledged and addressed.
And kind of circling back to that 25, when you quote acreage numbers at 25 per acre, is that for the whole farm, whether only part of the farm is used for improving water quality measures? Like, how is your total acres determined? Is it those actually enrolled, or is it the whole farm managed by that certified farm?
Yeah, I guess I didn't point that out at the beginning too, but the entire farm has to be enrolled to get certified. You can't pick and choose. And that includes rented land, all land, in a farming enterprise has to obtain certification status. And that means that every cropping scenario on every field has to have that risk mitigated status achieved. So on, one 40-acre parcel of a rented field under the corn year has an unmitigated risk. It's not going to, your rest of your entire farming or rest of your 1,500 acres are never getting certified because they have to address all of those. So, but to answer more specifically the question is that, yes, that does count the whole farming operation because there's a 40-acre field that needed no intervention because there were no particular risks. It was, or for example, that's, a parcel is in CRP. Well, that's hopefully very low risk. It's risk assessed nonetheless, just to see if there's something that might be there. But it is true that $25 an acre then does accompany the 20 acres of CRP on that farm, as well as the 600 acres of corn and soybean ground, whatever it might be.
Has there been interest in expanding this type of certification program in other states? Have you been approached by other organizations looking to expand?
We've had a lot of meetings like over the years. We've been at this for a little while now. And there's some good projects in other states. Michigan's MAPE program is often cited. I mean, what is it? Louisiana's like a master farmer program. Those are great, good efforts. We ultimately are different in the sense of our whole farm complete management, not pejorative invasiveness, but invasiveness nonetheless. I mean, I guess it's one way of describing it because we have to know everything that's going on, and it's not to catch anyone, it's to help them respond to it, find those challenges and help them fix it. So the different states have come, we have had conversations. One of the things may be odd to bring up, but one of the things that happens a lot is like, okay, well, that's cool. That was the Minnesota model, but we're Tennessee. We're not going to do Minnesota. We have to do Tennessee. And, that's kind of silly, but it's actually kind of an issue in the sense it's like, hey, our thing is stand in the field and see what the problem is. That's not Minnesota. That's not anything. Anybody can do this. And you don't have to feel like, oh, I owe Minnesota a patent payment for doing this work. It's like, no, the software exists. I mean, it can be used for anywhere at that data collection point, which isn't ultimately entirely rocket science either, right? That's just, well, I need to know how much the fertilizer is being put down when, and and the co-op has those records. So let's gather those who we know and say like, hey, you're over our U of M land grant recommendations for corn following corn. So you're not getting certified. You're going to have to drop your nitrogen down. Maybe you're going to split those applications, other things, but you're going to have to follow our BMPs for fertilizer management, that sort of thing. Well, other states have those. They could do the exact same thing. It's not Minnesota anymore. It's any state who wants to do it. So
the next question is, it looks like the program term is set to expire in the next year or two. What is the renewal process like at anticipated renewal rates of participants?
Good question too. Yeah. So our first 10-year certification of a farm